All right, let's see now. We're trying to get back into the Haggadah here. Let's see where we're up to. I want to pick up something which I forgot when I said it. Page 19. In the Sheraton Hotel Haggadah.
We actually have article ones now, but we've been doing this one for so long.
So now, I don't know if Vayareu Osanu, that they did evil to us.
You said they eviled us.
Yeah, right. You have it there?
Yeah.
So well, Ra is evil, and I said a kind of intuitive interpretation of it could be they eviled us, and I was going to explain why I said that, but I forgot to explain it. The usual translation is they did evil to us. But in order for any external power to do evil, the victim has to be susceptible. There has to be some weakness in the victim which makes him susceptible for that evil to apply to him. And the way it worked here is, first they undermined our commitment to what the Torah wanted from us. They made us evil. They made us evil. And then they were able to do evil to us. And if you think about it deeply, the doing of evil has both sides. If you cause my spiritual condition to deteriorate, you have done evil to me. But it's not the kind of evil on the surface like making me into a slave, but rather it's you've caused my spiritual condition to deteriorate. And one of the commentaries says it was one and then the other. They caused the spiritual condition to deteriorate, and then they put us into slavery. And that's why I said you eviled us would be a good translation. Awkward and unfamiliar, but would be accurate. Okay, now we explained that. And we talked about remembering the bris. I talked about Hashem seeing and only He knowing. Okay, now so this is, and our es amalenu. I don't know how they even translate that. Oh, I have a translate here. Oh, he calls it our sorrow. I don't think that's the right translation.
Did we jump? No.
I did. I jumped from where I was just talking now.
Okay.
But es amalenu. So you know some people, right? So it's on page 20, second paragraph.
Yes.
You have it there?
Yeah.
Okay. So here, the word amal can mean wasted effort. When you finish a Masechta, there's a certain ceremony you go through. There's a long recitation by the person who finished studying it. And one of the phrases there is, you have created us different from we who study Torah from those who don't study Torah. And it outlines a number of differences in our styles and qualities of life. And one of the things it says there is, Anu Amelu v'hem Amelim, we are Amal, we do Amal, and they do Amal. I forgot this was, okay, all right. Anu Amelu Mekablim Schar, we are Amal, and we receive reward for it. I'll wait for him to come back. Thank you very much. Okay, the unaided forces of nature will rectify that. So it says, we do Amal and they do Amal.
Get Rabbi one of those Slurpee holders.
Yeah, I'm used to the mode being over here.
Yeah.
Although I saw it, I completely forgot about it. And,
Wherever you usually go for 3 cups of water.
no, I usually get 2, and I usually drink 2. Almost 2. Low reservoir, 7.8 units. Okay, fine. Okay, let's go back to work. So we do amal and they do amal. We do amal and receive reward. They do amal and don't receive reward. That's what it says in the ceremony. And the Chafetz Chaim was asked, who are they? Well, let's say he's a shoemaker. So you say, we make effort, and they make effort. We make effort and do receive reward. They don't. Why not? He makes shoes, and people buy his shoes, and he gets paid for it. What do you mean that we both make effort, and we receive a reward, and he doesn't? Now, in the Chafetz Chaim's time, the way he got shoes was this. You walked into the shoemaker, and he measured your foot, and then he made you a custom-made pair of shoes. Isn't it as if you had 400 boxes and take your choice? Okay, so you go in, he measures your foot, you come back 2 weeks later, he puts on the shoes, and they don't fit. Do you pay him? Certainly do not. You came to buy a pair of shoes, you can't wear it, it doesn't fit. That's, they make an effort and don't get paid. Okay, now what would be the comparable in our case? We're saying they make an effort and don't get paid, and we make an effort and do get paid. So it would have to be that we're making an effort that doesn't bear fruit, and still we get paid. Otherwise, it's not parallel. What would that be? You're sitting and learning Torah, and you're trying to understand, and at the end of the day, you don't understand. You don't get it. Then what that formula is telling us is, if you make the effort and you don't understand, you still get paid. You still get a reward because you were studying Torah, you were attempting to understand it. You get paid for the attempt, not for the success. There are deep reasons for that. But that's it. So amal here can mean fruitless labor. That is to say, labor that's designed to produce a certain product and fails to do so. Now watch where it's applied by the Haggadah. It says, our amal, these are the children, the sons. As it says, every newborn male, throw him in the river. What does that mean? Well, you have pregnancy. Pregnancy is a 9-month investment in the development of a child. And birth is supposed to deliver that child to the parents. And it ends up fruitless. That's amal. The investment that you made in preparing for a child, and then there's no child. So I think the application there is very appropriate to that meaning of amal. Yes, lachatzenu, this lachas means pressure. That's the dachak that they pushed us with. And there just quotes a verse that uses those 2 words. I saw the lachats of which Mitzrayim were the pressure which they were pressuring them. And then Hashem, our God, Hashem took us out of Egypt with an outstretched hand. Sorry, let me get straight now. A strong hand, an outstretched arm, great awe, and with signs and wonders. So let's see. That's strong hand is 1, an outstretched arm is 2, great awe is 3, signs is 4, and wonders is 5. Now the Gemara will comment, the Haggadah will comment on that verse. Hashem took us out of Egypt, and it says, not via an angel, and not via another type of angel, and not via an agent. Rather, Kadosh Baruch Hu, with his own honor and his own identity, he himself took us out. As it says, I will pass through, God is speaking, I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from man to beast, and against all of the gods of Israel, I will do judgments. I am Hashem. So by implication, you have the word I there 4 times, and it means I and not any of these other possibilities. Now, I want to correct something which I have said, at least in recent years. Maybe before that I had it right. I don't remember back that far. This description, I did it completely on my own. This description is not easy to read into the straightforward, literal meaning of the verses. Because one of the verses says, I will not allow the destroyer into your houses. I will not allow the destroyer into your houses. Doesn't that sound like there's something called the destroyer that's going around destroying, and Hashem is protecting our houses from it? Well, what is the destroyer destroying? Presumably, the destroyer is the one that's killing the firstborn of the Egyptians. And then Hashem is saying, I won't let that destroyer come into your house. And with that explanation, the word Pesach, which is universally translated in English into Passover, gets a different meaning. And it's a different meaning that is correct. At least it's a correct meaning of Pesach. That is, the scene is this. There's a destroyer let loose, and that destroyer is killing the firstborn of the Egyptians. But the destroyer, in its own essence, doesn't distinguish between Jews and non-Jews, Jewish houses and non-Jews, Jewish houses. So when the destroyer comes to a Jewish house, Hashem stands in the doorway and prevents the destroyer from coming in. And then Pesach means that Kosh Baruch Hu leaps from house to house, stopping the destroyer from coming in to the house. And the phraseology in the Hebrew, Uvasach al Bata Yisrael, can mean that. There's a famous verse where Eliyahu is talking to people who have become attached to Baal worship, and he famously says, I'm going to challenge the priests of Baal to a contest in the Carmel Mountains. We'll each build an altar, we'll each put on a sacrifice, and we'll ask the powers we believe in to sing down fire from heaven, and we'll see which side wins. And of course, what happens is they both build the altars, and with wood and with a dead animal, and the priests of Baal yell and scream and go through their antics and ceremonies, and of course nothing happens. And then Eliyahu says to the people, come, let's build an altar to Hashem. He puts wood and he puts an animal, and then he says, bring buckets of water. Buckets of water, and soak everything that I have. Soak it, and there are trenches filled with water. The whole place is filled with water. And then Eliyahu calls for fire from heaven, and it comes down, and it consumes the animal, the wood, and the water. And people say, Hashem is God, Hashem is God. Now, in the middle, Eliyahu says to the people, how long are you going to straddle the fence? If Hashem is God, pledge allegiance 100% to Hashem. And if Baal is God, pledge allegiance to Baal. Make up your minds and take a position of principle. And the way he puts it in Hebrew is Ad Bosai atem poschim al shtei ha'seifim. And what that means in English is you have like two standing places, raised standing places, platforms, and you're jumping from one platform to the other, back and forth. You're poschim al Shtei hasavivim. You're jumping from one onto the other. Jumping onto, not over, but onto. The Pesach would mean to jump onto, not pass over, but jump onto. So that, to my mind, is the plain pshat in the verses. It's the plain understanding of the verses. What it seems like you have in the Haggadah here, and I used to say that in the name of the Ramban, and a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago corrected me and says, no, it's not the Ramban, so I looked it up. Ramban seems to agree with Rashi that Hashem himself is the one who's doing the killing of the Egyptians. And then Pesach would be translated as Passover. So there are these two positions. So what was called the holiday Passover aren't just making a mistake, but there are these two positions. Now, if I ask, if you think that Hashem is the one who's doing it, if you think that the destroyer is doing it, what does it mean to say that in the Haggadah, how you reconcile with the Haggadah? I am not an angel, not another kind of angel, and I am not an agent. I myself, you could reconcile it as follows. So here he's using something the Ramban says, but he doesn't have that pshat. When a king travels, the Ramban says, a king travels with a retinue. He doesn't travel alone. So the contrast between what the Haggadah is saying and the king's normal procedure would be this. The king is sitting in the capital, and he gets a report that in province XYZ, certain problems are taking place. So he appoints a representative and says, go out there and take care of it. The king doesn't run around personally from province to province, taking care of all the problems that come up. You couldn't run a kingdom that way. So very often, divine agency consists in some appointed divine representative that takes care of the situation that needs to be treated. Here, what the Haggadah is saying is that, in this case, Hashem, so to speak, didn't sit in heaven and send out a representative to take care of it. He appeared on site. But that doesn't mean that he was personally executing the Egyptians. That could have been done by one of his retinue. But he didn't do it from afar. He didn't send it from afar. He was on site, presumably overseeing the activity. So anyway, there are these two possible ways of reading it. And if you ask, come on, we're talking about the Creator, and he's really doing everything. And there aren't any real representatives because he would have to be creating and enabling and determining what the representative does anyhow. So the representative is not playing any role here. There's a poetical verse that describes God as riding on the backs of angels. And the way my oldest son put it to me once is, you think it makes it easier for him? Whew, boy, am I glad I have the angels to ride on, because otherwise it would be very hard, very tiring for me to move on my own. He's creating them and giving them the strength while they're, so to speak, carrying it. So he likened it to the mother who says to the 6-year-old daughter, come, let's bake a cake together. You tell me, does it make it easier for the mother or harder for the mother? When the egg actually slips out of her hands and cracks on the floor, or when she spills the milk into the sugar instead of into the flour. It doesn't make it any easier. So the point of it is to describe different, so to speak, divine attitudes towards the actions that are taking place. Some things can take place, so to speak, on automatic pilot because careful distinctions aren't necessary. Careful attention to tiny details aren't necessary. So, this is a new book which Hashem is hopefully coming out. The preservation of species of different animals doesn't require attention to which fly that fish eats. All it requires is that the fish not die. And even maybe this fish could die, and if there's another fish that's going to live, that'll be good enough also. But for example, when it talks about the destruction of stone, and it says that God says, I will go down and I will investigate. So the commentators say, he himself goes down and investigates, It's a question of destroying a city, destroying a whole population. In this case, destroying the whole surrounding natural environment. This is something which requires absolute attention to a great many subtle details. So it describes the Kodesh Baruch Hu as making a personal investigation rather than sending out an agent whose powers are less. So here, the idea of a Kodesh Baruch Hu appearing in Egypt, which has other implications as well, it would just be not because he's doing the actions, but because it requires his personal attention to take into account all of the myriad subtle details. That would be the other way of explaining it. So anyway, what I got wrong before was who's who. I said the Ramban said it was done by the Shliach, and the Ramban doesn't say that.
So what's the Yad Chazaka? 0 to 2 you could work like an outstretched arm. He's like dictating. What's Yad Chazaka?
Okay, that's a very good question. It's a very important question. The strong hand. What does it mean to attribute strength to God, to God's hand? Well, let's go back, doing philosophy. What is strength? What is strength? Strength is the ability to overcome resistance. Strength is the ability to overcome resistance. Okay, so now, when you speak about something or someone as strong, what you have in mind is some kind of standard resistance, and what you're saying is that this thing can overcome it. Well, it's not easy to find a reference point for attributing strength to the Creator. What kind of resistance could there possibly be where it would be significant to say, okay, listen, there is this terrible resistance, but don't worry, the Creator can handle it because He's strong enough to handle it. What kind of resistance could there possibly be would make that into a significant statement? And there is one. It could be internal resistance. He could be divided against himself, so to speak. And to make this real, we refer to different principles of divine action. As we have said on some occasions, that's all we really can describe with respect to Kodesh Baruch Hu. There are different principles of divine action, and in certain circumstances, the principles conflict. And then the strength is of one principle to overcome the other principle. So, for example, when a person performs a bad action, and the attribute of justice says, end! Finished! He has no right to live, he has no right to continue. And mercy says, you're right. He doesn't have any right to it, but the appropriate thing to do is give it to him anyway, even though he doesn't have a right to it. Coming from the side of loving kindness. And there, the two principles are opposed that would dictate opposite outcomes to this particular circumstance. And there we could talk about the strength of one to overcome the other. And in this case, a hand is the right hand, and the right hand is loving kindness, and it has the strength to, not always in every case, but many, many times, to overcome the opposing principle of divine justice. So that's one way to explain. Right. So having said that, to tell you, I rediscovered a Rashi, which I had totally forgotten this year. In the Song of the Sea, it says, Yimincha Hashem nadar b'koach, Yimincha Hashem te'atz oyev. Yimincha, your right hand, Hashem, is great in strength. Your right hand destroys the enemy. So it says right hand twice. And Rashi understands that as two separate statements, each about the right hand. And the question is, why repeat right hand? Just say the right hand does both things. And Rashi says something which really, my experience, is not characteristic of Rashi. Rashi says the meaning is that when Jews do what Kodesh Baruch Hu wants, the left hand becomes a right hand. So the first one is that it's full of strength. That's a general non-committal. And the second one is it destroys the enemy. That's left. That's destruction. That's divine justice. But it can become right also. The Jews do it, and then it comes out that Kodesh Baruch Hu has two right hands. That's what Rashi is saying. Again, this is not the normal, the standard thing for Rashi to talk about. And then Rashi says, and I would say, which Rashi very rarely says, I would say it's one hand that does both jobs. That means the single right hand does both jobs. These are the two right hands. Right hand that comes from the root of right, and a right hand which is the left, which becomes right under certain circumstances, and they really have two different characters. No, there's one hand. That means the right hand sometimes does pure chesed, and then sometimes the right hand, for the sake of chesed, can also do destruction. So the use of hand is a very rich concept and has a lot of different applications. Those of you who hear these kinds of words, if you know that these kinds of words also come from Rashi, maybe it'll make you a little more open to these kinds of ideas. Yeah? Okay, now it goes on. To break up that verse into pieces. We just did that, yeah. Now it says that when it says the strong hand, which is the first one of the five, that was the cattle sickness. As it says, and here the verse is explicit, behold, Hashem's hand will be in your cattle in the field. It gives the list of all the cattle. Very serious disease. And there it calls it hand. So if there's a hand here, could definitely refer to that there. Outstretched arm, this is the sword. The Kodesh Baruch Hu poetically used a sword. Now, here, okay, the Haggadah quotes a verse. His sword is unsheathed in his hand, stretched out over Jerusalem. And I always used to wonder, stretched out over Jerusalem. That sounds like it's being used to attack Jerusalem. Is that the kind of reference that we want here for the sword that Hashem used to save us in Egypt? But as a matter of fact, now I don't remember the exact words. Do you have a reference to which verse it is there? You probably do in your text. No?
Not here, but
You have it there? You must have it there, no?
About Jerusalem?
Yeah.
I don't see it.
This guy. Sure, on the bottom here.
Nope.
Oppression. No, here. Yeah. 3. Chronicles. Yeah, Devrei Hayam, 21:16. Is that a Tanakh?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll show you what the answer is here. 21:16.
No, that is.
This is the whole thing. 2 Chronicles 21:16. Where do they hide the? Okay. Going over there. It's okay. Let's see this here now. Maybe it's the wrong reference. 1 second. 16. Oh, what? 12. Why not? 2? Oh, 1 Chronicles. I misread it. Vision. Okay. Here we go. So, here's what it says. David raised his eyes and saw the angel of Hashem standing between the heaven and the earth, with his sword drawn in his hand, stretched out over Jerusalem. That's what we have quoted in the Haggadah. And now it goes on. And David and the elders, who were covered in sackcloth, fell on their faces. David said to God, surely I have said to take the count of the people, and I am the one who has sinned and acted wickedly, but these flock, what have they done? Hashem, my God, let your hand be against me and my father's house, but against your people there should be not a plague. The angel of Hashem told Gad, the prophet, to say to David, David should go up and erect an altar to Hashem, threshing floor of the Jebusite. David would then did what he said. Omer turned his back, seen the angel, and his 4 sons were with him, hiding. Omer had been threshing wheat. David approached, saw David. He came out threshing. Professor was David. Give me this side of the threshing floor. So there's the and then, see, I have given the cattle for David. Kodesh Baruch Hu made David made a sacrifice. And then, after he did that, Hashem then commanded to the angel, and he returned his sword to its sheath. So the end of the story is that this angel doesn't strike. He has his sword to punish the crime that was committed, but the crime was accounted for, and David repented for it, and rectified the situation, and the angel was told, put your sword back in your sheath. So this shows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu protected the Jewish people from the plague. That's why it's quoted here. So it's not like out of place that you're talking about Hashem saving the Jewish people, and you quote a verse with the angel who's attacking Jerusalem. What's the relationship with that? No, it's not because it's attacking. It's because that in fact came to nothing in terms of being attacked. You clear what I'm saying? Okay. But it took years and years for me to find that. And that's why it pays to remember the problems that you have and be patient. Okay, the Haggadah goes on. Great awe. This is the revelation of the Shekhinah. The revelation of Hashem's presence. As it says, this is where Moses speaking to the people about the incomparable history that they've had with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Has God ever come to take a nation from the midst of another nation with great trials, signs, and wonders, with great war, and with a strong hand, an outstretched arm, and great, awesome events, as all what he did for you when he took you out of Egypt, in front of your eyes. He did it in your eyes. So the idea of awe, I think, carries a double implication. Number one, here it says in the verse, he did it in front of your eyes. But awe is my response to something. Awesome means it provokes awe in me. For it to provoke awe in me, I have to have a certain understanding of it. We spoke once about praise. And when you say that something is great or outstanding, even outstanding is trivialized, but if something's great, if you think that what you see is unique, it could be called great. If you don't happen to know that it's very common, then you don't know that calling it great is a mistake. It isn't great. Just popular. So when I look at something and I'm filled with awe, it has to have some overwhelmingly important meaning. Now, different people's meanings are different psychologically. Could be just strength. And here you see the destruction of the Egyptians, and you know that they've been oppressing you and victimizing you for 90 years. And you know that this is being done by a power that has you in mind so as to benefit you, to get you out of their grasp and get you to Sinai to receive the temple. So you see the manager of the universe operating to bring about this great drama. That's what creates the awe. And here Moses is saying to the people, you've never heard of anything like that happening in all of history. And he's using that as an argument to say, when Hakadosh Baruch Hu promises you what in fact will take place, you know you can trust it because you see what Hakadosh Baruch Hu can do and has done specifically for you. That should be reason for you to accept what he promises to do for you in the future. That's what it says there. If you want this back, you can take it up. And now I see someone asked me a question in an email. I hadn't looked up the passage. He said, why does the Haggadah only quote the beginning of the verse? Why doesn't it quote the punchline? And the answer is that the punchline is 10 verses later. And it's not going to quote the whole. And it doesn't have ... to put in the middle. And because, according to their educational system, if you mentioned 3 words from a verse, the student of age 11 could tell you the entire end of the chapter by heart. After all, they spent 5 years studying Tanakh from 5 to 10, and by the time it was finished, they knew Tanakh basically by heart. Okay. And it says, signs. This is the staff. And this is very, and it quotes a verse when God sends Moses to Egypt to engineer the Exodus. He says, take the staff with you. That's the staff with which you will do the miracles. The staff which turned into a snake and to convince him at the burning bush to go down. The idea of an os is the idea of a symbol. An os is not just a remarkable event, but it's an event that carries a meaning. And it was the same staff over and over again. And even when Aaron did the symbolic action, he held Moses' staff when he did it. Even when he spread out his hand over the sea and split the sea, his hand had the staff in it. So the staff itself symbolizes divine power. If you read it correctly, you don't think of Moses as possessing magical powers. This is the staff which got its first distinction by God turning it into a snake and Moses running away from it. And then God telling him, don't conquer your fear, go grab it. And he grabs it and turns back into its staff. That's certainly not Moses' power operating on the universe. But it's something which God invested with power, and he wanted that to be used as the symbol of the creation of the plagues. And here I have heard people ask, if you're a believer in magic and you're looking at what's going on, here the human being performs an action and then there's this supernatural event. Why wouldn't people interpret Moses as a magician, as a sorcerer? And why would God do it in such a way as to at least make possible or plausible that misinterpretation? And I think that there's a fairly deep principle here. And the principle is, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to teach something that's true and valuable, the fact that some people will misinterpret it doesn't stop him. He's willing to accept the consequence of having a misinterpretation being reinforced as a price for teaching the thing that is appropriate, or doing something else that's appropriate, for some appropriate purpose. In the Gemara, the question is asked. I mean, maybe it's based on a verse in the prophets. I don't remember. If God hates idol worship and commands us in every possible way to destroy idol worship, why does God Himself tolerate the things that idol worshippers worship? And the answer that's given is what? Because people worship the sun, God should destroy the sun? No. The sun plays a necessary role, necessary in the sense the way Kodesh Baruch Hu set it up. It plays a crucial role in the running of the world. And Kodesh Baruch Hu is not going to destroy His world because some people misinterpret it. Same thing is true with certain verses which could be misread by idol worshippers. And so listen, call me anybody who wants to make a stupid misinterpretation, let it come and make a stupid interpretation. I'm teaching something that's valuable. Okay, that's the general principle. How does it apply here? So I believe the way it applies here is this. You're looking at a person, the person does something, and then there is a certain event. Even you might say, in a certain sense, he does it, and the event is a result. The plagues stop when Moses prays to God that they should stop. See, he prays and they stop. Now, if you take these events to imply that people have power, maybe that's true. Well, power. The future events will, in part, depend upon what the human being does. That's true. That's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. That our choices are the background that He uses in managing the world. It's His power and His decision that manages the world, but His principles are such that our actions are part of the basis on which His decisions are made to run the world one way or another. That's true. Someone's going to misinterpret that and say, leave God out and talk about sorcery, but that has to be taught. That the human being's actions do have this relevance to how God runs the world. So that could be a reason for having it done that way. But the symbolism in the staff is designed in part to contradict that this staff gets its distinctive nature from the fact that it was started out by being subject to the miracle that it became a snake and then returned to be a staff. And I think there's even more here. Now I'm speculating. It turns into a snake. Okay, but then Moses runs away because Moses is afraid of it. And because Baruch Hu says, grab its tail. Well, Moses has to overcome his fear, number one. And number two, when he grabs the tail, it becomes a stick again. Which means, because Baruch Hu is saying, it's my power and my decision to run the world, but I have associated you with that power, and I've put it into your hands to be the one whose actions occasion that power. That means, because it became a staff again, because Moses grasped it and made it back into a staff. So that's part of the lesson that's being taught, I think. Okay. Now, and mofsim, which are wonders. This is the blood. Because there's another verse that talks about blood being a wonder. Now, I do want to make a comment here also. We have a tradition that each plague lasted a week. So I want you to tell me how to think of this. You have the Nile River, okay? It's a long river, and the water is constantly flowing, and then it turns to blood. What does that mean? Well, there's the water in the river, and all of it turns to blood, but it's flowing. It's flowing. Immediately, some of the blood runs out of the end of the Nile River into wherever it empties, and new water is flowing in from the mountains. And then the water gradually cleans out, this area cleans out of blood as we filled with water. How long does the miracle of turning water into blood go on? Is it a week-long process? Is that what it means when it says every miracle was a week long? Or is it an instantaneous process? And it just takes a week to flush out the blood from the river. The answer is in the verses. If you read it carefully. I didn't read it carefully. My oldest son pointed this out to me many years ago. Because what the verses say 3 times is this. The water turned to blood, and as a result of that, the fish died, and the Egyptians couldn't drink water from the river because the dead fish fouled the water in the river. Got it? Water in the river. Which means that the turning of water to blood was instantaneous, and the flushing out started right away. But even the areas from which the blood was flushed, they still couldn't drink water because the result of the plague was that the fish died and the fish fouled the water. So the actual performance of the miracle of turning water to blood was instantaneous. The effect was a week-long effect. Okay? Okay. Little things to keep in mind. Very good. Pick it up tomorrow, Mitzvah.